and a very good Sunday morning to you here on Capitol Hill. I want to start with this article today in the New York Times. The headline, "Criticism of Veterans Affairs Secretary Mounts Over Backlog in Claims." It's talking about President Obama's Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Eric Shinseki. It says that the backlog, the huge, probably still growing inventory of claims for disability compensation filed by wounded or ill veterans as of Monday, was just under 600,000 claims that qualified as part of that backlog, meaning that they had been pending for over 125 days. Though the numbers have grown, delays in processing disability claims are nothing new, and neither are complaints about the backlog. Just last year, some veterans advocates tried to make the backlog a presidential campaign issue. They failed, but this year something changed. The criticism grew louder and perhaps more partisan and began reaching a wider audience. A new conservative-leaning nonprofit organization, Concerned Veterans for America, produced a web video calling for Mr. Shinseki's resignation and is sponsoring a similar online petition, which has been signed by more than 9,000 people. Representative Duncan Hunter, a California Republican and Marine Corps veteran of both the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, has joined the call. Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, the largest organization representing the new generation of vets, has also made the backlog the focus of aggressive lobbying in Washington, D.C., writing a letter signed by 67 senators that urges Mr. Obama to take direct action to resolve the problem. The group has stopped short, however, of calling for Mr. Shinseki's resignation. We're discussing this topic, and we want to hear from you on your ideas on fixing the system, and if you're a veteran or a family member of a veteran, your experience with the current system. Some Facebook posts that have already come in on this subject. Ann Artis writes in, "Use some of the Department of Defense employees to work on the backlog and stop initiating these wars," is her suggestion. Richard Smith writes in, "The VA is so overwhelmed with service people coming back from war, they can't take care of the vets they have now. If it is not a pressing demand problem, it gets lost in the system. The only way to fix it is to put vets in charge. They understand. The man off the street, it's just a job." And one other post from Jay Martin, "Too many chiefs and not enough Indians, top-heavy management, too much red tape, running cost through the roof." Those are just some of the comments on our Facebook page today. You can write in at facebook.com/cspan if you'd like to have your comments read on air. I want to show you now the article from the New York Times mentioned the Concerned Veterans for America releasing a 30-second ad calling for Mr. Shinseki's resignation. I want to play that for you now.
In October of 2009, 164,000 in the backlog. It's now 630,000. What is wrong here?
Veterans in the last 4 years, Candy, have joined us in unprecedented numbers.
This administration and you knew that the two wars were going to end. This is not a lack of caring, but this is a lack of something.
Normally when I've run into situations like this is a leadership issue.
And a little more from that New York Times piece in today's paper talking about Mr. Shinseki. He's a former four-star general and Army chief of staff. He remains deeply respected in Congress and for the moment secure in his job, the New York Times notes. The White House has expressed support for him, as have many mainline veteran organizations, including the American Legion and Veterans of Foreign Wars. Even the Republican chairman of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, Representative Jeff Miller of Florida, called him, quote, "an honorable, trustworthy gentleman" in an interview, but Mr. Miller raised questions about the secretary's staff, calling for the firing of Allison Hickey, the undersecretary who oversees disability compensation. The chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, Bernard Sanders, an independent of Vermont, also praised Mr. Shinseki for doing something rare in Washington, setting a deadline, in this case, to end the backlog by 2015, mainly by replacing paper claims with a digital process. Quote, "How many secretaries or presidents say, 'I'm going to do something by a certain date,'" Mr. Sanders said in an interview. So we want to hear your thoughts on the current system and ideas you may have on fixing that system. We've got a special line for veterans and members of veterans' families. We'll go to that now. Harvey is waiting from Fort Polk, Louisiana on that line. Good morning, Harvey. Harvey, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead. Want to get your experience with the current system?
Well, the current system as it is right now is that it lacks enough claims reps and claim offices for veterans to come and seek help and get their claims filed. And the delays and the time you have to wait, and the reps are overwhelmed with the amount of veterans coming in. And by the time they file all the claims and paperwork go through, you just don't have enough people to do the work of the backlogs. And if they would hire more people to do the work, then it would make the claim system way easier, and it would alleviate the overwhelm that we have right now.
Harvey, in a time of sequestration and cutting the government, do you think that's possible to do? Do you think Congress would be amenable to allowing VA to hire more folks?
Yes, I do. And we could adjust funds, take funds from one area to another area, and hire people to go to work. I mean, it's people that's out of work that need jobs. That would be something that they should look at. Look at NASA. I mean, you're looking at putting people and going to the Mars for what? I mean, take that money they're using for a space program at NASA and chip that to the VA to help the veterans. We've done died and wounded and hurt, and people are living in poverty as veterans, which isn't fair at all. And take that money and use it for the VA instead of looking to research going to Mars. For what? What's the point?
So it's a priority issue in your mind, Harvey?
Yes, it's all priority. It's all priority, and it's all politics. And we should be able to solve this issue very simply by shifting and adjusting funds like they did for the airport situation, and give the president has the authority to do it. So does Congress. They can really solve this problem if they really look deeply at areas where they can use other money. Thank you, and have a great day.
Harvey from Fort Polk, Louisiana, thanks for calling in this morning. Harvey brings up the issue of funding and sequestration and its impact on Veterans Affairs. Here's an article from today's Baltimore Sun talking about this issue. The headline, Veterans and Advocates Brace for Cutbacks. VA is exempt from reductions, but advocates warn veterans still will feel the effect of tighter budgets. To read you a little bit from that piece by Jamie Smith Hopkins for the Baltimore Sun, lawmakers exempted the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs from the across-the-board cuts to the federal budget known as sequestration. Veterans still, though, could feel the sting in a variety of ways. HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, has warned that agency cuts would affect homeless prevention aid and Section 8 housing vouchers that flow to veterans and other Americans in need. A HUD VA program called Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing is not due for sequestration cuts, but other programs are. Quote, over the last several years, we have made significant progress in reducing homelessness and achieving the national goal of ending veterans' homelessness, HUD Secretary Sean Donovan told Congress back in February. These sequestration cuts would lead us in the opposite and tragically wrong direction, he said. Ray Kelly, a lobbyist for the veterans of former wars, said it's the cuts in programs that aren't specifically for veterans that will really affect that population. Furloughs of federal workers, for instance. Veterans account for nearly half the civilian Defense Department workforce. Then there's the anxiety over what's to come for the VA. Quote, we dodged a bullet with sequestration, but there's no guarantees in the out years that Congress doesn't start eroding the benefits that they promised veterans. That's Ray Kelly, a lobbyist for the Veterans for Foreign Wars. Getting your thoughts on this issue, we'll go now to Kevin on our Republican line. Kevin, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. You know what makes me angry? We have veterans that fought for our country, are wounded, and we don't have enough money for them for rehabilitation. We give them red tape. But yet, we just had a bombing in Boston. These liberal Democrats from Cambridge, they'll fall all over themselves to bring in people that hate America. We'll put them up in universities. We'll college educate them. We'll give them housing and food stamps, and they hate America. But yet, but our veterans are left holding the bag, and it's just a shame America is just, I don't know. It's and we had housing World War II built for returning GIs of World War II. We don't have any more housing for veterans being built. I think in the VA, if you're not doing your job properly, you should be fired at the top and keep going and replace everybody till you get that agency functioning properly. Don't you agree?
Kevin, where do you think the calls for Shinseki's firing? I mean, do you think, as a Republican, do you think that this is a partisan issue, or do you think the man should be allowed the time to fix this problem? He said he'd have it done until by 2015.
Well, I think he should be given all the tools possible and personnel to fix it. I mean, you've got corporations out there. If corporations generally don't turn around in a year, the guy at the top's gone. But I just think, we're tired of excuses. You got veterans waiting, 6 months to go to a VA appointment. It's just incredible. But yet this stinking state of Massachusetts will bend over backwards for some foreign student. They'll give them free college, free food stamps, free housing, and but yet you got a veteran here that needs help, and sorry, tough luck, suck it up.
Kevin from Massachusetts this morning on our Republican line. Want to go back to that line for retired members of the military, their family members. James is waiting from Riverside, California, a retired Army. James, your experience with the current system?
Current system, it takes a while to actually get the compensation, but it does come through. They've compensated me over $50,000 in cash plus the monthly stipend every month, and it takes a while, but I did it myself. I just wrote them and told them what was going on, and they're taking care of me. I'm at 70% now. I should be at 100 soon. I have injuries from head to toe. I spent over 4 years in the infantry, and my comment was as far as the future of what we're going to do with these veterans, with the next generation or even this generation. Stop discharging them when they leave the military. They should have their disability benefits, all four of the branches. There shouldn't even be one claim at the VA as far as a disability claim. That should be done right as you exit the military, so that's squared away. All the dramas.
James, Mr. Shinseki seemed to indicate that it's a problem of computerizing the process, of turning it from paper to computer. Do you think it goes deeper than that?
Yes, I think before you leave the military, that when I went into the military, the physical was about an hour and a half or so. I did the duck walk and all that stuff. When I left the military, it was, you're going to heal, see ya. And it's like a 2-minute exit interview, and very narcissistic, and it hurts to stay, and I've been out for a while. I got out in 1998. So, and I didn't file a claim, maybe 6 years after I left the military, because I was driving on, and, I was working. It was painful, but I could do it. I was selling cars, and it was fun and fine, and, talking to people every day is fun, meeting different people, but I should have had the choice of being able to sit down, take a day off, because I had my benefits and not being so stressed on earning a living, just more of a getting out of the house type thing,
It's James from California this morning. Want to read a little bit from this piece from last week from the Huffington Post. Department of Veterans Affairs employees face mandatory overtime to clear claims backlog. This piece from the 15th of May. More than 10,000 workers who handle disability claims at the Department of Veteran Affairs will be required to work at least 20 hours of overtime each month in an effort to reduce a sizable backlog, the department announced last week. The overtime requirement will last through September and comes as many federal workers face furloughs because of mandatory budget cuts. The VA was exempt from those spending reductions, as we've said. We need to surge our resources now to help those who have waited the longest and end the backlog, said Allison Hickey, Undersecretary for Benefits at the VA. The VA has come under fire from veterans groups and members of Congress for the number of claims pending longer than 125 days. The advocacy group Iraq and Afghan Veterans of America said the VA's announcement was good to see, but it also emphasized that more was needed and renewed calls for President Obama to get more directly involved. Bringing the backlog down to zero will not be achieved piecemeal, and unfortunately there is no sign that the administration will bring together VA, DOD, and other agencies to develop a sizable plan a sustainable plan to address the structural problems that have created the backlog, said Paul Rykoff, the group's CEO and founder. Instead of chipping away around the edges, veterans need a comprehensive strategy. That according to the Huffington Post. We're getting your thoughts on this issue. I want to go now to Harry from Ohio on our independent line. Harry, good morning to you.
Good morning. The problem is the money. We're printing so much money, but we don't print people. The Creator God created people to live together. The problem in the world today is governments that want their way versus his way, which is the only way into this.
Harry, do you think the president needs to get more involved directly here? Are you seeing enough from the president on this issue of the backlog that we're talking about this morning?
Yes, sir. And we haven't had a president that will stand up for veterans since John F. Kennedy. And when Jimmy Carter was the president, he had a triple amputee from Vietnam by the name of Max Cleland as the VA head. And I do believe that Mr. Shinseki is also disabled. I am a veteran of the Vietnam era, and that is the first line of defense for our country, and we better respect that first line of defense, or the Russians will march right in here and tell us what to do when we should be doing what we should be doing, which is protect the benefits of every countryman that lives in this great country.
Harry from Ohio this morning on our independent line. He brings up Mr. Shinseki. I want to play you a little bit from that CNN interview back in March in which he announced that he would have this backlog fixed by 2015.
No veteran should have to wait for claims. If there's anybody impatient here, I am that individual, and we're pushing hard.
Why is it that the veterans themselves get the sense that the VA is an impenetrable bureaucracy? Because again, after 5 years, it seems like that's enough time to streamline this process.
Veterans in the last 4 years, Candy, have joined us in unprecedented numbers. There are 800 more veterans enrolled today than were enrolled 4 years ago in health care. 940,000 more veterans enrolled for benefits than they were 4 years ago. So the fact is that veterans are coming to us, and they are being enrolled. We produce 1 million claims decision each year, going out the door in half for the last 3 years. And so when we talk about an inventory of claims today of about 875,000 claims, of which about 600,000 are backlogged, just the amount of work we put out the door indicates that this is not a static number. There are going to be a few who are complex enough to go longer than we'd like, but there is a lot of work being done.
And that was Mr. Shinseki in an interview back in March. It was back then in March when he announced that he would have this backlog of 600,000 disability claims, benefits claims fixed by 2015. We're taking your thoughts on how to fix this system, your experiences with the current system. I want to go now to Marvin from Los Angeles, California, on our Democratic line. Good morning.
It is a disappointment. Mrs. Obama, the wife of the president, is more concerned and does more for the veterans and our active military personnel than the president. The president is just a disappointment. We can do more for our vets. I go out to the VA hospital 2 times a week. All right, we have to do more for our vets. The Veterans Administration employees in the healthcare services are top notch. They are really committed, and they are 100% committed to serving our veterans. The problem is at the White House. You have a guy who has an attitude that I'm going to punish America because they're not going to do this. I'm going to punish folks. He spends more time on hosting dinners for foreign secretaries, having parties for his friends, than having visited veterans in our hospitals and caring for our veterans. We can do better.
That's Marvin, who called in on our Democratic line with criticism of how President Obama has handled this issue. Here's a story from today's Washington Post talking about an upcoming address by the president on security issues. Unclear if he would address this issue in that upcoming speech. But the Washington Post notes that the speech will review legal standing of counterterrorism policy. President Obama will deliver a speech Thursday at the National Defense University in which he will address how he intends to bring his counterterrorism policies, including the drone program and the military prison at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, in line with the legal framework he promised after taking office. A White House official speaking Saturday on condition of anonymity to describe the speech in advance said Obama will discuss our broad counterterrorism policy, including our military, diplomatic, intelligence, and legal efforts. He will review the state of the threats we face, particularly as the al-Qaeda core has weakened but new dangers have emerged. The official said he will discuss the policy and legal framework under which we will take action against terrorist threats, including the use of drones, and he will review our detention policy and efforts to close the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay. A preview of that speech that's happening Thursday at the National Defense University. I want to go back to our military families and veterans line to get their experiences on the current system with filing claims. Elizabeth is calling in from California this morning. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning. I just wanted to say welcome to the future of Obamacare. This is what it's going to look like, and I don't know why anybody would think anything run by the government is going to look any different. Thank you.
Elizabeth calling in on our military families line. Want to talk about a little bit more from that New York Times story that we started this discussion with, talking about a generational component to the date over how to fix the current system. The article notes that older, more traditional veterans groups have supported Mr. Shinseki and endorsed his plan for ending the backlog. Those groups agree with him that the backlog is less about incompetence and more about an antiquated processing system overwhelmed by new veterans, aging veterans, and expanded benefits programs. Bob Wallace, the executive director of the Veterans of Former Wars Washington office, praised the administration for investing money on automating the claim system. The backlog has been a problem for years, he said. I hate to say this as an advocate, but fixing it is not going to happen overnight. But many younger veterans groups have been more impatient for change, and those younger veterans have been aggressive about raising the backlog issue online, on television, and in Washington. For people in their 20s, the idea that we can't get this technology updated seems ridiculous, said Mr. Rykoff, who served as an Army infantry officer in Iraq. We're getting your thoughts on this issue, and we have a special line for veterans and family members of veterans. John is on that line now from Louisville, Tennessee. John, good morning to you.
Good morning. I am a disabled veteran of the Vietnam War. I had no problem with the VA in getting my retirement because I have a background of many years, some 40 years, in the claims field for the insurance industry. The problem we have is the doctors, hospitals, people that put forth the information necessary to get the claims processed. I handle my claim myself. I got the information that was needed by the VA. I sent it to VA, and I got quick results.
How long did it take you, John?
Maybe a couple of months.
But not the 125 days that we're talking about here. Are you talking 1 or 2 months?
Oh yeah, it was. You know, I understand delay in processing or the cost of time in processing, but you can't process a claim without the information necessary to do it. And doctors, hospitals, and people involved in doing this, they may be really slow. Some of them may not be responsive. Most veterans send their claim in and expect the VA to come with all of the information necessary to process the claim, and that's up to the doctors and hospitals and people who have to certify. So that's the reason you have the backlog. The VA processor can't do the claim without the information. I mean, you can't just say, oh, here's a claim and stamp it approved. You have to have documentation. And being a claims man, I documented my claim, but most veterans think the VA is going to gather this information on their own.
So for you, John, it's a two-way street that needs to be sped up on both sides?
Yeah. That's you can't do the claim if you don't have the documentation. That's the point I wanted to make. And I thank you for accepting my call.
John from Louisville, Tennessee this morning. We're taking your thoughts all morning. John was talking about his experience and how long it took him, said just a couple months to process some of his claims. Here's an article from last week from KXXV in Waco, Texas. Texas Congressman Williams criticizes VA claims backlog. In Waco, the wait time for VA claims is about 150 days or 4 months longer than the national average. In November of 2012, Senator John Cornyn said Waco had the longest wait time and the most backlog than any other office in the nation. Despite that, the former regional director of the Waco office received more than $53,000 in performance bonuses for 2011. Texas Rep. Roger Williams said, quote, "How the heck can a guy get a bonus for that kind of job performance? That's wrong too, and that's taxpayers' money, so we need to address that. The first thing we need to do is understand who we're there to serve, and that's the veterans." The VA told the station that it's not going to comment on individual decisions for bonuses, but they do say that they will not be issuing bonuses for the 2012 fiscal year, and that money will go to help fix the backlog. Congressman Williams called out the VA, saying the backlog has reached, quote, "a critical tipping point." He wrote a letter to the VA expressing his concerns about that situation. In it, he said, "This backlog crisis is a crisis that may worsen over time as more men and women begin to return home from Iraq and Afghanistan." We're taking your thoughts this morning. I want to go now to Murray from Grantville, Georgia, on our independent line. Good morning, Murray.
Yes, good morning. How are you today?
Good.
This is just so much. We could spend days talking about this, but, I filed a claim, 20 years ago, and 3 months later, it was approved. And if you have a valid claim, there's not a problem. And I'm going to tell you something. We live in a nation, gimme, gimme, gimme. I want something for nothing. You go to the Atlanta VA, I guarantee you look around, and you're going to see a lot of people, veterans, honorably discharged veterans, that are looking for something for nothing. Okay? Ain't nothing wrong with them. And when you see 90% of those people in the wheelchairs with no legs, you know what it's due to? Obesity and diabetes. That didn't come from war now. It came from bad habits. And looking for something for nothing. Now they flood the system. And the deserving veterans who need, and their families who need, can't get because of the moochers. And these congressmen
So do you
and
think
these senators,
the Veterans Affairs Department needs to look more at the individual claims, study them closer to find out more about the specific claims, Murray? Is that what you're advocating for?
Absolutely. And when they do that, that's why it takes 125 days. Because that's what they're doing now. And that's why so many of those claims are rejected out of hand, because they're not, there's no substance to them. But somebody told somebody, go file a claim. You can get something for nothing. Go file a claim. Get some money. No, go to work. Get an education.
That's Murray from Georgia this morning. Let's go back to our military line to get their thoughts on the subject. Craig is from California this morning, retired military. Craig, your thoughts on the process and the subjects that Murray brought up on the last call?
Well, you know, the people say that they have a hard time filing claims. Yeah, that's true. But the fact remains that I've been trying to do this process for 35 years, and they denied that my unit was even a functioning unit, and I had to Google and go on many websites to bring up even pictures of my ship and send it to the VA, and I finally got a date of looking at my claim on the 30th of this month. Yeah, it's taken a long time. I am combat wounded, and I do think that there are some people out there that are having a hard time, but the thing that remains is the new people that are coming in, it's going to be so jammed up. My son just got back from 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan, and he's way more messed up than I am. But, you know, I don't know how to focus all this in. I mean,
do you think the president needs to get more involved in this issue?
No.
Personally?
Well, I don't know if it takes more involvement or it takes determination. It takes, you know, people that really think that they have an issue to, you know, hang in there and keep doing it. Yeah, it's taken me a long time, but, you know, there are certain units that were clandestine and, you know, that have issues, and there's all of us together. If we put our heads together, I'm sure, you know, you can figure something out. But it's like when I came home from overseas, I brought about 72 rifles and 17 handguns thinking, oh, the government's out to get me. I've since sold everything I've got, and I don't own a gun in my house. And, you know, it's like the Tea Party program and all this other crap. You know, it's all a bunch of BS. You know.
All right, Craig, we'll stick on the subject of the Veterans Affairs issues for right now. Here's a story about the Department of Defense from the Hill's blog briefing room. Pentagon officials asked Congress to shift $9.6 billion. The Pentagon wants Congress to shift $9.6 billion in this year's Defense Department budget toward expenses for the Afghanistan war, transportation, and other items. This from yesterday in the Hill. Moving $1.3 billion to the Army to support funding shortfalls in Afghanistan is the largest request, Bloomberg reports, citing budget documents. The Pentagon also wants to funnel $1 billion into the transportation budget to pay for higher than expected fuel costs. The money would also come from smaller research programs and weapons buying accounts, according to Bloomberg. The Pentagon sent the request to Congress along with its $79.4 billion warfighting budget proposal. The House Armed Service Committee will begin consideration of the defense bill next week. The Defense Department is in the process of scaling back spending as sequestration will shave $500 billion from its budget over the next 10 years. But as we noted in one of those earlier stories, that the Veterans Affairs Department is exempt from some of those sequestration cuts. But we're getting your thoughts on the backlog at Veterans Affairs for benefit filings. Chris is up next from Long Island, New York, on our Democratic line. Chris, go ahead.
Hey, how you doing? Good morning. Yeah, I want to say, like, my father was a veteran. I'm not a veteran, but we put claims in for him. I helped him with quite a bit, and he really didn't have any problem. The people in the VA are very, very friendly towards veterans. Other veterans, people that work there, I mean, genuine. They're genuine people there. I think the only problem, I think, is that when you're asking a question about what we can do for the veterans is that you have to ask somebody who's really a veteran, because other people take other problems. When you're asking about veterans, Boston, Massachusetts, forget what happened there. You know, I couldn't tell you how to fix that. A veteran can tell you what his needs are more than any ordinary person who never had any military family or anybody that saw that kind of problem. Like I saw my father-in-law, he gets, anytime he needs help, he's got it. These guys try so hard to help. It's unbelievable. I commend these people in the VA, the way they handle problems. Thank you.
Chris from Long Island, New York, talking about listening to veterans. Here's Jimmy Olsen on our Facebook page with the comments on the subject. Go to any VFW hall and listen to vets talk about how they cannot stand the current administration. Obama is so despised among vets, is Jimmy Olsen's comment on our Facebook page. We're taking your calls, your tweets, your Facebook messages on this subject. Want to go now to our independent line. Tom is waiting from Groves, Texas. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. I was going to say, why don't they take the young men from the service academies to surge on the backlog during their summer break or their summer training?
So use them, put them into some of these positions to try to fill that backlog?
Yes, use a surge, so to speak.
Do you think, are you saying to do that because money is tough to come by these days in the federal government in terms of moving more money to some of these programs? Why do you say to use these folks?
They're intelligent, they're disciplined, and they're motivated. And they may come up with some ideas on how to clear some of this stuff.
All right, Tom from Groves, Texas this morning from the independent line. One other tweet on this subject. VA continuously gets a bad rap. I've had nothing less than positive experience since retiring. Hardworking people doing a tough job. That's from Photo Dude on Twitter. Also should note this week on Newsmakers, Congressman Chris Van Hollen, the top Democrat on the House Budget Committee, talked with C-SPAN. Van Hollen talked about Congress's difficulties in tackling the debt and agreeing on a budget, as well as how the administration and Congress are responding to the IRS's targeting of conservative groups. I want to play you a clip of that right now with Congressman Van Hollen talking about the IRS targeting issue.
The conduct was clearly unacceptable, and we need to get to the bottom of it. We also need to recognize that after the Citizens United case, you had about a doubling of applications from groups for 501c4 tax status. And that's because there are lots of groups, both Republican-leaning, Democratic-leaning groups, that are trying to get this kind of tax status to conduct political activities without disclosing their donors. And that's why the IRS is having a tough time. They've got to go through all these applications to decide whether the main purpose of an organization is social welfare or whether the main purpose is political and hiding donors. Clearly, they went about it in totally the wrong way, but we need to apply the law uniformly. And in my view, if you finally require disclosure of donors for people participating in political activities, you would actually eliminate the incentive a lot of these groups have to try to get this particular kind of status.
And you can see the entire interview with Congressman Van Hollen Sunday today at 10 a.m. And 6 p.m. on C-SPAN. It's also available online at cspan.org. That IRS controversy that Congressman Van Hollen was talking about, leading a lot of the news and editorial pages today. It was one of the reasons why Chris Cillizza in the Washington Post gave President Obama the Worst Week in Washington award, his weekly award on who had the worst week. He notes, for a president who wanted to spend the week and the weeks to come talking immigration and the budget, the events of the past 7 days virtually ensure that he won't be doing that anytime soon. We'll be looking at the IRS issue and the Benghazi issue and how it's playing into the president's second-term agenda in our next 45 minutes on the Washington Journal. But we still have a few minutes left on this subject of the VA backlog and getting your ideas and thoughts on how to fix the system. Bud is a retired military member from Tallahassee, Florida. Bud, thanks for calling in this morning. Your experience with the current system?
Yes. I understand the claim process. In other words, they validate a claim, and it takes a long time to do that. But once a claim is approved and validated, why does it take, in other words, in my case, I've had a validated claim since September 2011, and it took them a year to validate it. But They started sending me compensation a year after I applied. So I received but from September 11 to September 12, they're supposed to give me the back claim. I haven't received it. It's been almost 2 years, and that's a validated claim. Again, pending claims, I understand they have to validate them. Now, why do I think the backlog exists? People work at home. I don't know what percent of the VA employees work at home, but they need to have a system where they can monitor the production of people that work at home. Some people do a good job. Some people, I don't think they're doing their job. So that's my point is validate.
But let me ask you, as a retired member of the military, we had a Twitter question that you might be able to speak to this subject. Still, an individual writes in on Twitter, ask some of these military families why they choose the military life, knowing their treatment. I want to ask you, Bud, do you think that these issues that are coming up with the Veterans Affairs Department, these benefits issues, is going to affect the recruitment of members of the military in the future? Do you think it's affecting people's choice on whether to decide to go into the system now or not?
I don't think it'll affect the recruitment, but it might affect the career choices. In other words, once you are on active duty and you decide to go career or not go career, then that might be a factor. But no.
Whether they decide to make it the long-term job?
Yes, that's correct. Most young people are patriotic and they're ready to go, ready to see what they can contribute. So they're not going to change. But the ones that are actually trying to decide go career or not, or get out, get discharged, that might be a factor.
Bud from Tallahassee, Florida, thanks for the call this morning. We'll go now to Greg, also in Florida, from Jacksonville on our independent line. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. 34-year watcher of C-SPAN. Enjoy the show, and thanks for taking my call. I have a couple of issues, if you just give me a quick time. One,
go ahead.
What really is very agitating to me is the first caller, who's the veteran Maury from Georgia, who indicated that he got a claim for his benefits, but then when he goes into the Atlanta VA, he sees a lot of other guys, and they're applying for their benefits, and he calls them moochers. I think that's insulting to that veteran community, even with him being a veteran. Very insulting. He got his. Now he's talking about other people trying to get theirs. That's the first thing. The second thing is, when it comes to why the VA is having so much problems, that Secretary Nsheke expanded what would be new service-connected issues with veterans, particularly coming out of Vietnam when it came to Agent Orange. So that has opened up a whole canopy of new issues for the VA people to look at when it comes to claims. And, of course, you had a guy that was calling out of Tennessee who said that he did have the appropriate documentation, the evidence, et cetera, to get a claim documented. The VA people who are doing the claim is under a tremendous amount of pressure, trying to get these claims out, with some shortage in those people who are reviewing those claims, getting and waiting for the documentation to substantiate those claims, as a number of your callers were talking about. So they're under a tremendous amount of pressure, not only to get the job done, but also to do it right, where there is no, in a sense, misrepresentation of the facts from combat injuries and related. But the most aggravating thing to me, C-SPAN and C-SPAN watchers, are these congressional people who've never served in the military, whether under combat condition or otherwise, who continue to berate the president, who berates the VA, who berates the IRS, but they've never put on the uniform. They can sit back behind the desk and talk about what the VA is not doing, but they never put on the uniform when it was time for them to serve their country, whether in peacetime or whether down in wartime. So give the VA a chance to do the job that they've been trying to do. Secretary Nsheke is just overwhelmed with all these new issues that they have to look at. And, of course, the most important thing now is to get these younger kids, these kids who have done 2, 3, 4 tours over Iraq and Afghanistan, to get them situated first and see if we can move on to this thing.
Greg from Jacksonville, Florida, thanks for the call this morning. The story, if you'd like to read more about this, is in today's New York Times. Criticism of Veterans Affairs Secretary mounts over backlog in claims. If you have a policy issue you'd like to see featured on a future Washington Journal, send it to us at journal@c-span.org or tweet us at cspanwj #W.